Video is recording. You are live. Sharing your screen. So we are Chanach 82 and verse 6. Are you seeing the text on there? And you can hear me, right? Well, it's hard for you to know if you can hear me since you're right next to me. But there should be a delay. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Would you like to continue reading?
Sure.
All right.
We're reading from Enoch Rishon, chapter 82, and we're picking it back up in verse 6. Respecting these, men greatly err and do not calculate them in the calculation of every age. It's talking about those 4 days. For they greatly err respecting them these days, nor do men know accurately that they are calculations of the year. But indeed, these are marked down forever, one in the first gate, one in the third, one in the fourth, and one in the sixth, so that the year is completed in 364 days. Truly it has been stated and accurately has been calculated that which is marked down for the luminaries, the months, the fixed periods, the years, and the days. Uriel has explained to me and communicated to me whom Yahuah of all creation on my account commanded according to the might of heaven and power which it possesses both by day and night, to explain light to man, of the sun, moon, and the stars, and all of the powers of heaven, the Shamayim, which are turned with their respective orbs. This is the ordinance of the stars, which set in their places, in their seasons, in their periods, in their days, and in their months. Verse 10. These are the names of those who conducted them, who watch and enter in their seasons according to their ordinances in their periods, in their months, in their influences, and in their stations. For conductors of them first enter, who separate the 4 quarters of the year. After these, 12 conductors of their classes, who separate the month and the year 364, with the leaders of 1,000 who distinguish between the days as well as between the 4 additional ones, which conductors divide the 4 quarters of the year. These leaders of 1,000 are in the midst of the conductors, and the conductors are added each behind his station, and their conductors make the separation. These are the names of the conductors, who separate the 4 quarters of the year, who are appointed: Melech, Melech, Meliael, and Nareel. And the names of those who conduct them are Adnaral, Yashar'Al, and Yelem. These are tough ones. Jyelumel, and that's a lumen in there. Okay, so Yalumael. 15. These are the 3 who follow after the conductors of the classes, each following after the 3 conductors of the classes, which themselves follow after those conductors of the stations, who divide the 4 quarters of the year in The first part of the year rises and rules Melchias, who is named Tam-Ani or Zahi, footnote, or the southern sun. All the days of his influence which he rules are 91 days, and these are the signs of the days which are seen upon the earth. In the days of his influence, perspiration, heat, and trouble. All the trees become fruitful, the leaves of every tree comes forth, and the grain is reaped. The rose and every species of flowers blossom in the fields, and the trees of winter are dried up. These are the names of the conductors who are under them: Baruk, Zelzabel, and another additional conductor of 1,000 is the name Holelah. Let's do this again. Hel Oi Aleph. I can see the Aleph in there. The days of those influence have been completed. The other conductor next after them is Melech. Melech at the end, king, whose name they call the splendid Zahi, which is, by the way, footnoted, or sun. All the days of his light are 91 days. These are the signs of the days upon the earth, heat and drought, while the trees bring forth their fruit, warmed and concocted, and give their fruits to dry. The flock follow, mate, and bear young. All the fruit of the earth are collected, with everything in the fields, and the vines are trodden. This takes place during the time of his influence. These are the names and the orders and the conductors who are all under them, who are the chiefs of the 1,000: Gedayael, Kiel, Heiel, and the name of the additional leader of the 1,000 is Asael. The days of his influence have been completed. 83. And now I have shown you, my son Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to your birth. I will relate another vision which I saw before I was married, and resembled each other. The first was when I was learning a sefer, and the other before I was married to your mother. I saw a potent vision, and on account of these things besought Yahuah. I was laying down in the house of my grandfather Mahaliel. I saw in a vision heaven thrown down and removed. Footnote, purifying and stretched away. And when it fell upon the earth, I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills. Lofty trees were gliding off of their trunks and were in the act of being projected and of sinking into the abyss. And at these things the word fell down in my mouth. Or, footnote, my voice faltered. I cried out and said, the earth is destroyed. Then my grandfather Mahaliel raised me up and said to me, why do you thus cry out, my son? And wherefore thus do you lament? I related to him the whole vision which I had seen. He said to me, confirmed is that which you have seen, my son, and potent the vision of your dream respecting every secret sin of the earth. in substance shall sink into the abyss, and a great destruction take place. Now, my son, rise up, I beseech you, Yahuah of the Kavod, for you are a faithful, that a remnant may be left upon the earth, and that he would not wholly destroy it, my son. All this calamity upon the earth comes down from the Shamayim. Upon the earth shall there be a great destruction. Then I arose, prayed, and entreated, and I wrote the whole thing down. I wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, explaining everything to my son Methuselah. When I went down below, and looking up to the Shamayim, beheld the greater light, the sun, proceeding from the east, and the moon, the lesser light, descending to the west. A few stars and everything which Elohim has known from the beginning. And I baruked Yahuah of judgment, and magnified him, because he has sent forth the sun from the windows. And footnote, windows, chambers of the east, that ascending and rising in the face of the heaven it might spring up and pursue the path which has been pointed out to it. Continue, want to discuss. Okay. Chapter 84 of Enoch Rishon, first Enoch. I lifted up my hands in Zadokness, in righteousness, and gave Barakah, blessed the Kodesh and the great Echad, the great one. I spoke with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which Elohim has formed for all the sons of mortal men, that with it they may speak, giving them breath, a mouth, and a tongue to converse with. Oh, Kodesh are you, O Yahuah, the Melech, the King, great and powerful in your greatness, Yahuah of all, the creation of Shamayim, Melech, Melechim, the King of kings, Elohim of the whole world, who reign, whose Malkut, whose kingdom, and whose majesty endure forever and ever, Leolam Vaed. From generation to generation shall your dominion exist. All the heavens are your throne forever, and all the earth your footstool forever and ever. For you have made them, and over all you reign. No act whatsoever exceeds your power.
Hallelujah.
With the wisdom, the Hatmah is unchangeable, nor from your throne and from your presence is it ever averted. You know all things, see and hear them, nor is anything concealed from you, and you perceive all things.
Mm-hmm.
The angels of your Shamayim have transgressed, and on mortal flesh shall your wrath remain until the day of that great judgment. Now then, O Elohim Yahuah, our mighty Melech, our King, I entreat you and beseech you to grant my prayer, that a posterity may be left to me on the earth, and that all of the mankind may not perish, that, the earth may not be left destitute, and destruction take place forever. Oh, Master Adonai, let the race perish from off the earth which has offended you. But the Tzedak, the Tzaddikim, the righteous and upright race established for a plant of a seed of posterity forever. Hide not your face, O Yahuwah, from the prayer of your servant. 85. After this I saw another dream, and explained it to all of you, my son. Enoch arose and said to his son Methuselah, to you, my son, I will speak. Shema, hear my word, and incline your ear to the visionary dream of your father. Behold, I was married to your mother, Edna. I love that part of details. I was waiting for it to come up.
Edna.
So, Edna. I saw a vision on my bed. Footnote. The second vision of Enoch seems to betray a symbolic language of the complete history of the world from the time of Adam down to the final judgment of the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. Okay. End of footnote. And behold, a cow sprang forth from the earth, and this cow was white. Okay, these right here I will explain as we go down if I'm able to, or we might go back, because I started looking at these the first time I read it and going, wait a minute, these are familiar. If he's trying to describe something in the future, he's going to probably be described by animals. He's having a vision of dream. These are people in the future. Okay, so, behold, a cow sprung forth from the earth, and this cow was white. Afterwards, a female heifer sprung forth, and with it another heifer. Footnote, another heifer. A sense seems to require that the passage should read two other heifers. Just reading the footnotes. The one was black and one was red, or Cain and Ha'avel. That's the footnote. The black heifer then struck the red one and pursued it over the earth. From that period, I could see nothing more of that red heifer. So now we know the type and symbology of the red heifer. But the black one increased in bulk, and a female heifer came with him. That's important if you go back to the other books. Anyway, well, continue. 7. After this I saw many cows proceed forth, resembling him and following him. First female, young one, also went out in the presence of the first cows, and sought the red heifer, but found him not. And she lamented with great lamentation while she was seeking him. Could that be Hava? When I looked until the first cow came to her, from which time she came silent and ceased to lament. Afterwards she calved another white cow, and again calved many cows and black heifers. In my sleep, I also perceived a white bull. So in his sleep, it's a dream. He perceived a white bull, which in like manner grew and became large white bull. After him, many white cows came forth resembling him, and they began to calve many white cows and resembled them and followed each other. 86. Again I looked attentively while sleeping, and I surveyed the Shamayim above. And behold, a single star fell from the heaven, which being raised up, ate and fed among those cows. After that I perceived other large and black cows, and behold, all of them changed their stalls and pastures, while the young began to lament one with another. Again I looked in my vision and surveyed heaven. Then, when, behold, I saw many stars, which descended and projected themselves from the heaven to where was the first star. Into the midst of those young ones, while the cows were with them, feeding in the midst of them, I looked, and at it I observed them, when, behold, they all acted after the manner of horses, and began to approach the young cows, all of whom became pregnant and brought forth elephants. Well, that sounds like the mixing of seed, but oh, wait a minute. So this is where elephants come from. So they brought forth elephants, camels,
Cows and horses.
asses. There's some of those asses still around. I've met a few. Anyway, continuing. At these, all the cows were alarmed and terrified when they began biting with their teeth, swallowing and sticking with their horns. They began to also devour the cows. And behold, all the children of the earth trembled, shook with terror at them, and suddenly fled away. Again, 87. Again I perceived them. I looked again, when they began to strike and to swallow each other, the earth cried out. Then I raised my eyes a second time, double look, towards the Shamayim, and saw in a vision that, behold, there came forth from the heaven the Shamayim, as it were the likeness of white men. One came forth from there, and three with him. Those three who came forth last seized me by the hand, and raising me up from the generations of the earth, elevated me to a high station. Then they showed me a lofty tower on the earth,
Babel.
while every hill became diminished. And they said, remain here until you perceive what shall come upon these elephants, camels, asses, and upon the stars, and upon all the cows.
In the fall. Fallen angels.
So, and yes, this is actually the time before the flood, I'm assuming. Because Noah has been introduced, and the three that come out of him. Chapter 88. Then I looked at that one of the four who came forth first. He seized the first star which fell down from the heaven, and binding it hand and foot, he cast it into the valley, a very narrow, deep, stupendous, and gloomy.
So who was the first star?
I know who that is.
Yeah. Yep, there you go.
So, but the one that came down and cast him there, who was that? He was the one that was in the beginning with him that created. So, anyway, okay, I'm reading into the text. We'll continue. Then one of them drew his sword and gave it to the elephants, camels, and asses, who began to strike each other. And the whole earth shook on account of them.
Yeah, so earlier in Enoch, there was a reference to, I think it was maybe Azazel that was giving them like armors and weapons and swords and things.
Chain mail. Yep. And When I looked in the vision, behold, one of those 4 angels who came forth hurled from the heaven, collected together, and took all the great stars, whose form partly resembles that of the horses, and binding them all hand and foot, cast them into the cavities of the earth. Dun, dun, dun! So it's saying that some of those fallen ones were put in the earth even before the flood.
Yeah, and I think aren't they referenced when we were reading around like the Tigris and Euphrates and the 4?
I don't know that those are fallen or disembodied spirits. But yeah, there's 4 bound at that area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 89. Then one of those 4 went to the white cows and taught them a mystery.
Yeah.
So here he's speaking, I would assume, Noah speaking to his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Actually, that could be, but I also remember that it was reading that another one of the mighty ones was teaching all these mysteries and secrets. You'd have to go back and look at it, but I think it's probably the birthplace of secret societies, secret wisdom and knowledge, and so. But yep.
So we'll start from the beginning. Then one of the 4 went to the white cows and taught them a mystery. While the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man. Footnote 188, Noah.
That's right, the one that built a large ship.
And fabricated for himself a large ship. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows, footnote,
There's
Shem,
the sons.
and Japheth,
There you go.
dwelt with him in that ship, which covered them. Kapar. Again, I lifted up my eyes towards the Shamayim and saw a lofty roof. Above it were 7 cataracts.
The 7.
Footnote, high waterfalls, which poured forth from the earth, which poured forth on a certain village much water. Again, I looked, and behold, and there were fountains open on the earth in that large village. The water began to boil up and rose over the earth, so that the village was not seen, while its whole soil was covered with water. Much water was over it, darkness and clouds. Then I surveyed the heights of the water, the Mayim, and it was elevated above the village. It flowed over the village and stood higher than the earth. Then all the cows which were collected there, while I looked on them, were drowned, swallowed up, and destroyed in the water. But the ship floated above it. All the cows, the elephants, the camels, the asses were drowned on the earth.
Hallelujah.
And all the cattle. Nor could I perceive them, neither were they able to get out, but I perished and sunk into the deep.
They perished, right?
They perished. Let me read that again.
Yep, that's okay.
Misty eyeballs. Neither were they able to get out, but perished and sunk into the deep.
Well, unfortunately, that's not where we heard the last of them.
Yeah. Again, I looked in the vision until those cataracts, those giant waterfalls from that lofty roof
Firmament
were removed, and the fountains of the earth became equalized. So they're pouring forth as much water from above as below. So while other depths were opened, into which the water began to descend until the dry ground appeared. The ship remained on the earth. The darkness receded, and it became light. Then the white cows, which became a man,
Noah.
went out of the ship, and the 3 cows with him, Shem,
Sons.
Ham, and Japheth.
Yep.
One of these 3 cows was white,
Kadesh.
resembling that cow. One of them was red as blood, and one of them was black.
Black.
And I would have to say that it would have been Jephthah that was white. And the white cow left them. They then began wild beasts and birds to bring forth. Of all these, of the different kinds of assembled together, lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, wild boars, foxes, rabbits, and Hanzar. The Sisset, the Avest, the kites, the Fonkas, and the ravens. Then the white cow, footnote, Abraham, was born in the midst of them.
Which of the sons of Noah brought forth Abraham?
Shem.
That would have been Shem.
So Shem would have been white, right?
As in Kodesh. Yes.
The line that brings forth ultimately Yahusha.
Right. I see Jephthah as being the white-skinned one, but this isn't talking about...
No, it's not. So the one that's black is going to be...
Cain.
Cain was the first black, but the son of Noah who was black was Ham.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Which born in the midst of them, and they began to bite each other. When the white cow, which was born in the midst of them, brought forth a wild ass and a white cow. Footnote.
Jacob and Esau.
Esau and Yaakov. No, excuse me. Yishmael and Yitzhak. Skeptic generation.
Sorry about that. Got excited.
Now let's read that again. And they began to bite each other. The white cow, which was born in the midst of them, brought forth a wild ass and a white cow at the same time, and many wild asses. Then the white cow, footnote, which is Yitzhak, which was born, brought forth a black wild sow. And a sow would be a what?
Pig.
Wow.
And a white sheep. Footnote is that's where it says Esau and Yaakov. That wild sow also brought forth many swine.
Wow. Unclean.
That's Edom, the Edomites. They're the Idumean. Line continues even till we are today. But back to our story, I digress. Verse 20. And the sheep brought forth 12 sheep. Footnote, the 12 patriarchs. When those 12 sheep grew up, they delivered one of them. Footnote, Joseph, to the asses.
Mitzrayim.
Footnote, Mitzrayim. Again, those asses delivered that sheep to the wolves.
Wow.
And he grew up in the midst of them. Okay, and if you get into the book of Yashar, he was sold to the Amalekites, and the Amalekites sold them to the Ishmaelites. And that history there's a lot of detail there. Okay, and he grew up in the midst of them, so this would be in Mitzrayim, when Yahuah brought the 11 sheep, that they might dwell and feed with him in the midst of the wolves. Footnote, for wolves, the Mitzrayim, the last one we said Mitzrayim was Midianites. And now he was sold to the Mitzrayim.
Okay.
they multiplied, and there was abundance of pasture for them. Goshen. It doesn't say this, but I know that.
Yeah.
But the wolves began to frighten and oppress them, while they destroyed their young ones.
Mm-hmm.
And they left their young in torrents of deep water.
Wow.
By the way, the viewers can all learn about this in the book of Exodus. I recommend that read. Now, back to our story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the sheep
Right
began
around
to
the
cry.
firstborn.
Now the sheep began to cry out on account of their young, and fled for refuge to their Adonai. Echad 1, footnote, Moshe. So that's the footnote 1, however, which was saved, escaped, and went away to the wild asses. I beheld the sheep moaning, crying, and petitioning their Adonai with all their might, until Yahuah of the sheep descended at their voice from lofty habitation, went to them and inspected them. He called to the sheep which had secretly stolen away from the wolves, and told him to make the wolves understand that they were not to touch the sheep. So this is talking about Mitzrayim and those that are in heavy bondage there.
Yeah, let my people go.
So then the sheep went to the wolves with the word of Yahuah, when another met him. Footnote, this would be Aaron, and proceeded with him. Both of them together entreated the dwelling of the wolves, and conversing with them made them understand that hereafter they were not to touch the sheep. Afterwards I perceived the wolves greatly prevailing over the sheep with their whole force. The sheep cried out, and their Adonai came to them. He began to strike the wolves, who commenced a grievous lamentation. But the sheep were silent, nor from at that time did they cry out. Then I looked at them until they departed from the wolves. The eyes of the wolves were blind, who went out and followed them with all their might and strength. But Yahuah of the sheep proceeded with them and conducted them. All his sheep followed him. This countenance, terrific and splendid and magnificent, was his aspect. Yet the wolves began to follow the sheep until they overtook them in a certain lake of water.
Red Sea.
Footnote, the Red Sea. Oh, no spoiler alerts.
Sorry.
Then that lake became divided, the water standing up on both sides before their face.
Hallelujah.
Now, would you say that Enoch was an eyewitness to that event? I would have to say absolutely. And while their Adonai was conducting them, he placed himself between them and the wolves. The wolves, however, perceived not the sheep, but went into the midst of the lake, following them and running after them into the lake. But when they saw Yahuah of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face. Then the water, the mayim of the lake, returned, and that suddenly, according to its nature, it became full and was raised up, until it covered those wolves. And I saw that all of them which had followed the sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep passed over this water, proceeding to a wilderness of the Midbar, which was without both water and grass. And they began to open their eyes and to see. Then I beheld Yahuah of the sheep inspecting them. He was inspecting them and giving them water and grass. The sheep was proceeding and conducting them. And when he ascended the top of this lofty rock, Yahuah of the sheep sent him to them. Afterwards I perceived their Adonai standing before them with an aspect terrific and severe. And when they all beheld him, they were frightened at his countenance. All of them were alarmed and trembled. They cried out after the sheep and to the other sheep who had been with him, and who was in the midst of them, saying, We are not able to stand before our Adonai, or to look upon him. Then that sheep who conducted them went away and ascended the top of the rock. When the sheep began to grow blind and to wander from the Vaderek, the path which he had shown them, a path of instruction, but he knew it not. Their Adonai, however, was moved with great indignation against them. And when that sheep had learned, he descended from the top of that rock, coming down to them, found there were many which had become blind,
The golden calf.
had wandered from his path. As soon as they beheld him, they feared and trembled at his presence, and became desirous of returning to their fold. Then that sheep, taking with him other sheep, went to those which had wandered, and afterwards began to kill them. They were terrified at his countenance. Then he caused those which had wandered to return, who went back to their fold. Likewise, I saw there in a vision that this sheep became a man, built a house, footnote, a house or a tabernacle, for Yahuah of the sheep, and made them all stand in the house. That would be the Mishkan. I perceived also that the sheep which proceeded to meet this sheep, their conductor, died. I saw too that all the great sheep perished, while smaller ones rose up in their place, entered into a pasture, and approached a river of water.
Jordan.
Footnote, the river Jordan. Then the sheep, their conductor, who became a man,
I know.
was separated from them and died. All the sheep sought after him and cried for him with bitter lamentation. Maybe they didn't know where he was or where he was laid. I saw likewise that they ceased to cry after the sheep and passed over the river of water, and that there arose other sheep, all of whom conducted them instead of those who were dead and whose had conducted them. Footnote, This is speaking of the judges of Yashar'Al in that period of time, the book of Shoftim Judges. Then I saw that sheep entered into a wonderful place and a territory delectable and wonderful.
Milk and honey.
I saw also that they became satiated. At their house was in the midst of a delectable territory, and that sometimes their eyes were opened, and that sometimes they were blind, until another sheep arose and conducted them. We have a footnote here, and this would be Shemuel, son of Hannah. So, continuing, then dogs, foxes, and wild boars, that would be those Edomites, began to devour them, until again another sheep arose. A footnote. Well, now we get into Shual of the tribe of Benjamin, King Saul, the master of the flock, one of themselves, a ram to conduct them. This ram began to butt on every side those dogs, foxes, and wild boars until they all perished. With his eyes he saw the ram in the midst of them, who had laid aside his esteem. And he began to strike the sheep, treading upon them and behaving himself without dignity. Then their master, their shepherd Adonai, sent a sheep to a still different sheep. A footnote.
I know.
Would be David. So, sent a sheep to a still different sheep and raised him up to be a ram and to conduct them instead of that other sheep who had laid aside his esteem. Going therefore to him and conversing with him alone, he raised up that ram and made him a prince and a leader of the flock. All the time that the dogs, a footnote, the Philistine, troubled the sheep, the first ram paid respect to the latter ram. Then the latter ram arose and fled away from before his face, and I saw that those dogs caused the first ram to fall. So Saul committed suicide in a battle. Jonathan was died. That would be talking about that same battle. But the latter ram arose and conducted the smaller sheep. That ram likewise begat many sheep and died. Then there was a smaller sheep, a footnote, Shalom, a ram instead of him, which became a prince and a leader conducting the flock. And the sheep increased in size, and they multiplied. And all the dogs, the foxes, the wild boars feared and fled away from him. That ram also struck and killed all the wild beasts, so that they could not again prevail in the midst of the sheep, nor at any time ever snatched them away. And that house was made large and wide, a lofty tower being built upon it by the sheep. For Yahuah of the sheep and the house was low. But the tower was elevated and very high. Then Yahuah of the sheep stood upon that tower and caused a full table to approach before him. Again, I saw that those sheep wandered and went various ways, forsaking that their house, and that their Adonai called to some among them a footnote. This would be the Na'abi, or the prophets, whom he sent to them. But these sheep began to kill. And when one of them was saved from the slaughter, a footnote, it says we're speaking of Eliyahu. So when one of them was saved from slaughter, he leaped and he cried out against those who were desirous of killing him. But Yahuah of the sheep delivered him from their hands and made him ascend Allah to him. Ascend Allah is the word there. So he was made to ascend to him, the master of the sheep, right? And remain with him. And he sent also many others to them to testify with lamentation and exclaim against them. Again, I saw when some of them forsook the house, the bet of their Adonai and his tower, wandering on all sides and growing blind. I saw that Yahuah of the sheep made a great slaughter among them in their pasture, until they cried out to him in consequences of that slaughter. Then he departed from his place of his habitation. A footnote, place of habitation, Bet Ha Mikdash Rishon, or the first temple, and left them in the power of lions, tigers, wolves, and hyenas. A footnote, lions, tigers, wolves, and the zebut, the Asherim, it says lions or Babylonians, tigers or Asherim, wolves, Mitzrayim, hyenas, the Shamaritans or Shamrayon. Okay, so, and in the power of foxes and of every beast. And the wild beast began to tear them. I saw too that he forsook the house of their fathers and their tower, giving them all into the power of the lions to tear and devour them, into the power of every beast. Then I began to cry out with all of my might, imploring Yahuah of hosts of the sheep, and showing him how the sheep were devoured by all the beasts of prey. But he looked on in silence, rejoicing that they were devoured, swallowed up and carried off, and leaving them in the power of every beast for food. He called also 70 shepherds. A footnote here, which 70 shepherds, the ancient Sanhedrin or elders Zakan of Yashar'Al. Shemot, Exodus 24:1, and Bidmidbar 11:16, Ezekiel 8:11, under the leadership of Yahazayahu, the Nazari, who joined the conspiracy of Qadashayam, and this is spoken of in Melachim, 2 Kings 25. Sometimes we just got to read the footnotes. And resigned to them the sheep. So now the sheep are in someone else's care, that they might overlook them, saying to them and to their associates, every one of you hereafter overlook the sheep, and whatever I command you, do. I will deliver them to you numbered. I will tell you which of them shall be slain, these destroy, and he delivered the sheep to them. Then he called to another and said, understand and watch everything which the shepherds shall do to the sheep. For many more of them shall perish than I have commanded. Of course, of every excess and slaughter which the shepherds shall commit, there shall be an account.
False teachers.
As how many may have perished by the command, and how many they may have destroyed of their own heads. Okay, let's stop here, because Yirmiyahu talks about these despicable shepherds.
Yeah, chapter 23.
Yep. Okay, back to our story. And all of the destruction by each of the shepherds, there shall be an account.
Whoa.
And when you look at an accounting equation, it's meticulous down to the very penny. So, an account. And according to the number, I will cause a recital to be made before me. So it's going to be reread, recited.
Yeah, and repaid with interest.
Yeah, okay. How many they have destroyed of their own heads, and how many they have delivered to destruction. So it's talking about these wicked shepherds that are causing destruction on those sheep, the body, the flock.
His lambs. They're supposed to be looking over his lambs.
Yeah.
Go back to Torah and think about the penalty. What happens if you mismanage your brother or your neighbor's ox, cattle? You have to pay back with
those that are listening, and you would never consider yourself one, but you could be a wicked shepherd.
Yeah.
That I may have this testimony against them, that I may know all their proceedings, and that delivering to them, I may see what they will do, whether they will act as I have commanded them or not. However, they shall be ignorant, just ignorant. Neither shall you make any explanation to them, neither shall you reprove them. Don't even correct them. But there shall be an account of all the destruction done by them in their respective seasons. Then they began to kill and destroy more than it was commanded them. And they left the sheep in the power of the lions. A footnote.
Babylonians.
The city of Babylon, the citizens. So that very many of them were devoured and swallowed up by the lions and tigers, and the wild boars preyed upon them. That tower they burnt and overthrew that house. A footnote. That tower they burned and overthrew that house. The Beit, the house, Ha-Mikdash, the palace of Shlomo.
Yeah, right?
So that many... Oh.
Good, honey.
Then I grieved extremely on the count of the tower, and because the house of the sheep was overthrown. Neither was I afterward able to perceive whether they again entered that house. The shepherds likewise and their associates delivered them to all those wild beasts that they might devour them. Each of them in his season, according to his number, was delivered up. Each one of them, one with another, was described in a sefer, a book. How many of them, one with another, were destroyed in a sefer? More, however, than was ordered. Everyone killed and destroyed. Then I began to weep, and I was greatly indignant on account of the sheep. In like manner, also I saw in the vision him who wrote, how he wrote down one destroyed by the shepherds. Every day he ascended, remained, and exhibited each of his sepharim, his books, to Yahuah of the sheep, all which they had done, and all which each of them had made away with, and all of which they had delivered up to destruction. He took a sefer up in his hands, read it, sealed it, and deposited it. After this, I saw shepherds overlooking for 12 hours, and behold, 3 of the sheep, a footnote, Zerubbabel, Yahusha, and Nehemiah, departed, arrived, went in, and began building all which has befallen the house, all which had befallen that house. Lost my place.
112.
That's what I thought. Okay. But, which had fallen down the house. But the wild boars, footnote, the Shamaronians, or the Samaritans as we know them, hindered them, although they prevailed not. Again, they began to build as before, and raised up that tower, which was called a lofty tower. And again they began to place before a tower a table, which every impure and unclean kind of bread upon it. Moreover, also all the sheep were blind, and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise.
Disobedience.
Thus were they delivered up to the shepherds for the great destruction. Oh, by the way, when we were talking about the one that went up every day and handed off that sefer, who do you think that may have been?
Yahusha?
I think it was Yeshayahu, Isaiah. And let's continue, because it will tell you where the time period is that we're at. So, 1:15. Moreover, also all the sheep were blind and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise. Thus, they were delivered up to the shepherds for a great destruction, who trod them underfoot and devoured them. Yet was there Adonai silent, until all the sheep in the field were destroyed. All the sheep? The shepherds and the sheep were all mixed together, but they did not save them from the power of the beasts. Then he who wrote the sefer, and that is a footnote of Baruk, the scribe, who was Yirmiyahu's right-hand man, friend, and successor. So then Baruk wrote a sefer, ascended, exhibited it and read it at the residence of Yahuah of the sheep. He petitioned him for them and prayed, pointing out every act of the shepherds and testifying before him against them all. And taking the sefer, he deposited it with them and departed. The one thing that I was reading in another book, it gave the identity of Baruk in the other land. He was known as Zeradosht, and he was one of the wisest of the wise of that land, and he wrote books. And that is where we get a lot of the Assyrian religion. That was the wholesome part. Does that make sense? No. When he wrote the Sefer, ascended, exhibited, okay, we're at 90. And I observed during the time that thus 37 shepherds were overlooking. Footnote on the 37, an apparent error for 35. See verses 7, the kings of Yehuda and Yashar'Al. That's a Lawrence note, by the way. So the 37 shepherds were overlooking, all of whom finished in their respective periods as the first. Others then received them into their hands, that they might overlook them in their respective periods, every shepherd in his own period. Afterward I saw the vision that all the birds of Shamayim arrived. Eagles, a footnote for eagles, is Rome. The Avest, the kites, and the ravens, these are all unclean birds and beasts that he's describing, by the way. The eagle instructed them all, and the eagle, by the way, is on every Roman banner, as well as American flag as well. I'll be darned. Anyway, these began to devour the sheep, to peck out their eyes, and to eat up their bodies.
Wow.
The sheep then cried out, "Meh, save us," for their bodies were devoured by the birds. I also cried out and groaned in my sleep against the shepherd which overlooked the flock. I looked while the sheep were eaten by the dogs, by the eagles, and by the kites. They neither left them their body, nor their skin, nor their muscles, until their bones alone remained, until their bones fell upon the ground, and the sheep became diminished. I observed likewise during the time that 23 shepherds, a footnote, the Sanhedrin, the kings of Babel, etc., during and after the captivity. The numbers 35 and 23 makes 58 and not 37, and erroneously put in the first verse, and that was a mistake by C. Lawrence, the original translator. So, these shepherds were overlooking and completed in their respective periods 58 periods. So this is a period of time. Then were small lambs. A footnote, the 12 prophets. So these small lambs, born of those white sheep, who began to open their eyes and to see, crying out to the sheep. The sheep, however, cried not out to them, neither did they hear what they uttered to them, but were deaf, blind, obdurate in their greatest degrees. Obdurate. a new one for me, an obdurate. Okay. I saw in the vision that ravens flew down upon those lambs, that they seized one of them, and that tearing the sheep into pieces, they devoured them. I also saw that the horns grew up from those lambs, and that the ravens lighted down upon their horns. I saw too that a large horn, footnote, the large horn, Yahuchanan, John, John the Baptizer. So this is the immerser. Also, son of Zechariah, Cohen Hagadol, rightfully. Anyway, so this large horn sprouted up out on an animal among the sheep, and that their eyes were opened. He looked at them, their eyes were wide open, and he cried out to them. Then the Dabella, a footnote, Dabella, Eliyahu to come, and this is from Malachi 3:23, another and greater, Yochanan, the baptizer, and it gives some other references to Yochanan the Baptist, or who this person was. Dabella saw him, all of whom ran to him, and besides this, all the eagles, the avast, and the ravens, and the kites were still carrying off the sheep, flying down upon them and devouring them. The sheep were silent, but the Dabella lamented and cried out. The ravens contended and struggled with them. They wished among them to break his horn, but they prevailed not over him. I looked on them until the shepherds, the eagles, the avasts, and the kites came, who cried out to the ravens to break the horn of the Dabella, to contend with him and to kill him.
Yahusha.
But he struggled with them and cried out that he might come to them. I think that's what Dabella means. Then I perceived that the man came who had written down the names of the shepherds, which the footnote says this is Baruk, and who ascended up before Yahuah of the sheep. He brought assistance, footnote, Moshe, and caused everyone to see him descending to help the Dabella. This would be the Mount of Transfiguration. Oh, it's the footnote, Mount Transfiguration 17:2 in Matthew. I perceived likewise that Yahuah of the sheep came to them in wrath, while all those who saw him fled away. All fell down at his tabernacle before his face, while all the eagles, the avast, the ravens, the kites assembled and brought with them all the sheep of the field. All came and strove to break the horn of the Dabella.
The horn.
The horn of the Dabella. Then I saw that the man who wrote the Sefer of the word of Yahuah opened the Sefer of destruction, of that destruction which the last 12 shepherds, footnote, the minor prophets, wrought, and pointed out before Yahuah of the sheep that they destroy more than those who preceded them. I saw also that Yahuah of the sheep came to them, and taking in his hand the scepter of his wrath, seized the earth, which became rent asunder, while all the beasts and the birds of heaven fell from the sheep and sunk into the earth, which closed over them. The footnote, end of the world. I saw, too, that a large sword was given to the sheep,
Yashar'Al?
who went forth against all the beasts of the field to slay them. But all the beasts and the birds of heaven fled away from before their face. And I saw a throne erected in a delectable place, a land. Upon this sat Yahuah of the sheep, who received all his sealed sephirim, which were open before him. Then Yahuah called the first 7 white ones and commanded them to bring before him the first of the first stars. This is into the book of Revelations, is he peeking into, which preceded the stars. The footnote, stars, angels, or in Chazan 1, verse 20, whose form partially resembled that of horses. The first star, which fell down first, footnote, the serpent, mentioned in Bereshit chapter 3. And they brought them all before him. And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, and who was one... Did I skip something? Am I in the right place?
You're okay. I think you just missed which fell down first, and they brought them all before him. That's the end of 32.
Okay, so 33.
Mm-hmm.
And he spoke to the man who wrote in his presence, who was one of the 7 white ones, saying, Take those 70 shepherds, to whom I delivered up to the sheep, and received them, killed more of them than I had commanded. Behold, I saw them all bound and standing before him. First came on the trial of the stars, which, being judged and found guilty,
Fallen angels
went to the place of punishment. We've read about that place a few times in this feast in different places, different descriptions. They thrust them into the deep, full of flaming fire and full of pillars of fire. Then the 70 shepherds were judged, and being found guilty, were thrust into the flaming abyss. The 70 shepherds that were called would have been the succession of those emissaries that the Messiah sent out as bishops. Wouldn't you agree? Let's continue. I may be reading. There's no footnote.
Well, maybe not all those are right either, but it's good to share them.
That's true. At that time, likewise, I perceived that one abyss was thus opened in the midst of the earth, which was full of fire. And to this were brought the blind sheep, which being judged and found guilty, were all thrust into the abyss of the fire on the earth and burnt. I never knew you, you workers of iniquity. The abyss was on the right of the house. I added that last one from another book. Listener, please know that wasn't in the text. That was me. Okay, so, and I saw the sheep burning and their bones consuming. I stood beholding him emerging that ancient house, while they brought out its pillars, every plant in it, and the ivory enfolding it. They brought it out and deposited it in a place on the right side of the earth. I also saw that Yahuah of the sheep produced a new house,
Hallelujah.
great and loftier than the former, which he bound by the former circular spot. All its pillars were new, and its ivory new, as well as more abundant than the former ancient, which he had brought out. And while all the sheep were left where in the midst of it, all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the heaven fell down and worshipped them, petitioning them and obeying them in everything. The creation groans in eager expectation for the sons of Yahuah to be revealed. New Testament writer would speak. Okay, so then those three who were clothed in white and who, holding me by the hand, had before caused me to ascend, while the hand of him who spoke held me, raised me up, and placed me in the midst of the sheep before the judgment that took place. The sheep were all white, with wool long and pure. Then all who had perished and had been destroyed, every beast of the field and every bird of Shamayim, the heaven, assembled in that house, while Yahuah of the sheep rejoiced with great simcha, happiness, because all were tov and had come back again to his dwelling. And I saw that they laid down the sword which had been given to the sheep, and returned it to his house, sealing it up in the presence of Yahuah. All the sheep would have been enclosed in that house had it been capable of containing them, and the eyes of all were opened, gazing on righteousness. The righteous one, the Echad, nor was there one among them who did not behold him. I likewise perceived that house, the bed, was large, wide, and extremely full. I saw, too, that a white cow was born, whose horns were great, and that all the beasts of the field and all the birds of heaven were alarmed at him and entreated him at all times. Then I saw that the nature of them was changed, that they became white cows, and that the first in the midst of them spoke. When that word was a wild ox, a footnote, spoke when that word came out, or as a wild ox, and that wild ox was. So, then, when a word was a wild ox, upon the head of the wild ox were great and black horns, while Yahuah of the sheep rejoiced over them and over all the cows. I laid down in the midst of them. I awoke and saw the whole. This is the vision which I saw, lying down and waking. Then I Kodeshed and Baruked Yahuah of the darkness of righteousness, and gave him esteem. Afterwards I wept abundantly, nor did my tears cease, so that I became incapable of enduring it. While I was looking on, they flowed on account of what I saw. For all was come and gone by. Every individual circumstances respecting the conduct of mankind was seen by me. And that night I remembered my former dream, that therefore I wept and was troubled because I had seen that vision. Let's take a break for a minute.
Okay.